This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. In 2004, Green Day, the punk pop band fronted by my guest Billie Joe Armstrong, released a Grammy-winning album called American Idiot. Instead of looking inward for his material, as Armstrong had done when he wrote songs about his anxiety, relationships, and panic attacks on the albums Dookie and Nimrod, he decided to write about politics, specifically the alienation and anger he felt during the presidency of George W. Bush. The punk rock opera, as the album was called, was recently adapted into a Broadway show with virtually no dialogue and with the actors telling the story largely through movements on stage. Armstrong says that watching his musical vision come on the stage was a transformative experience. We're going to start with Green Day's version of American Idiot, followed by the version on the new Broadway cast recording, which features singers from the show accompanied by Green Day. Billie Joe Armstrong, welcome to Fresh Air. So you play on the soundtrack of the Broadway cast recording, but the cast sings. What would you say are the main differences between the Broadway versions of your songs and your versions?
Oh, it goes from a 3-piece band to a 20-piece vocal ensemble, When we did the album the first time around, it was like me, Mike Dirnt, and Trey Cool doing everything. And then this time it was, dealing with the string section and dealing with how all the characters were kind of coming out, and as far as the play or the musical, if you will, were involved.
One difference I've noted is I think the Broadway singers enunciate more clearly than you
that
do.
Was a big, that was a big deal when we're, being a rock singer, I can get away with a lot, because most of the time people don't know what the hell you're saying anyway. That's why we have lyric sheets,
And there's a long tradition of that in rock.
Yeah. And then, but the tradition, we were in the studio with Michael Mayer and
he's
and
the
Tom
director.
Kitt.
Yeah,
who's the director, and Tom Kitt's the arranger. And when they were listening to the singers, they were saying things like, who, can you please, I can't hear the T in this particular word, and we're looking, we're like I can hear it fine, it's no, but that's just the difference between theater people and rock people, I guess.
I bet no one has ever said to you, "I can't hear the T."
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
So the songs in American Idiot are rooted in part in the Bush administration era, and I'm wondering what performing for you was like then, particularly performing songs from American Idiot.
I think I felt a sense of empowerment. I think in the beginning, right after, 9/11 and then watching sort of the tanks going into Iraq and everything sort of, these embedded journalists, going in, live. It felt like a cross between, it was a cross between war and reality television. And so I just felt this like great sort of confusion, and I was like, someone needs to say something. I don't really know, I don't know how it's going to come out, but whatever it has to be, it's got to be something very bold and get someone's attention immediately. Just as because if you're so distracted, by what's going on on television, you're just watching it. It's like but in reality, what you're doing is you're sitting there on the couch and just sort of seeing the world unfold and explode and lives being lost right in front of your very eyes. So for me, it was just I kind of felt this moment of just it was like rage and patriotism, I guess you'd want to call it that, and I just wanted to write something that was it just felt very That song wrote itself in probably 30 seconds.
I want to play another song from American Idiot, and this is Holiday. Would you put this song in the context of what you've been talking about politically?
Yeah, it's when I think of Holiday, it's like fragments of sort of political confusion, and it takes the English language and kind of it's like it goes against using English words against itself or something, especially like Sieg Heil to the President Gasman, which actually is German also, but it's yeah, it is. It's kind of another one. Like it was sort of after the song "American Idiot," then doing "Holiday." I felt even more empowered to write something like that.
So here's Holiday from the Green Day album "American Idiot." That's Holiday from the Green Day album American Idiot. And of course, now there's a Broadway musical called American Idiot featuring the songs from the album. American Idiot is in part about the anger and discontent of young people entering the larger world. And in the Broadway show, it's also about, one of the characters having to fight in Iraq. How far away does that part of your life seem when you were in your teens or early 20s finding your place in the world?
For me, I mean, when the first time that you escape from home or the small town that you live in or whatever, there's a reason why a small town is called a small town is because not that many people really want to live there. So to try to get out and see something more, and for me, I had a place called Gilman Street, and it was a club, a punk rock club in Berkeley, and I was just introduced to a lot of new ideas. And
so that was your escape.
I think that was my escape, and there was this sort of feeling of like I felt there was another moment in time where I felt empowered, and because I was getting an education that I wasn't really getting being at home anymore, or from the schools that I had to go to. It was sort of this feeling of just like, oh, I'm out of prison, But in the musical, there's a lot of the guy Johnny, Jesus of Suburbia, as he's finding this sort of self-righteousness, he ends up finding sort of some self-destruction, and I think those are the bumps in the road that you take, because you have to take bruises as you get older or coming of age.
Did you have that problem, self-destruction?
Oh yeah, I mean, I still do. Anytime that you challenge yourself or you take risks, you have to deal with scars. And the only thing you can do is look down and learn from them and keep moving on.
There's a lot of anger in the songs in American Idiot. I assume anger is an emotion that you're familiar with. So
yeah.
When you were a teenager, what was generating most of the anger?
Feeling lost. I always say that in every song I write, whether it's a love song or it's a political song or it's something or a song about family, the one thing that I find is feeling lost and trying to find your way. I think a song like American Idiot, it's a series of questions. I think Holiday is a series of questions. It's like you're trying to battle your way out of your own ignorance. And that's where it's personal. It's like, I don't want to be an American idiot. What I want to be is I'm not sure. I just want more. And I'm willing to take the risk to try to, get out of that, or to try to find something more. So that's, I don't know. So it's just lost and trying to dig your way through all the sort of the mental wrecking yard, I guess.
I know your father died when you were young. How old were you?
10.
And he had cancer of the esophagus. Did that contribute to you feeling lost, do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think it went, but beyond that, I remember I was always the kid that got lost in like the shopping mall, or like I got lost in Santa Cruz,
Really?
walking the boardwalk when I was like 5 or 6. I was always just daydreaming constantly, and I still am. I have a lousy sense of direction in so many different ways, and I think losing someone that young. It's hard because like when you deal with death, like when you lose someone when you're young and you dealing with death, you suddenly realize that death is a part of life. So when death comes knocking again at a certain time, or if it's a friend or a loved one, it's like you start to not get used to it. You just see it, and when you see it over and over again, you just realize like that. Like I said before, it's a part of life. But it's hard because you see a very strong-willed man. It's like you see him crumble within a matter of 3 months. It's like, it's the beginning of summer, and then by the end of the summer, it's a completely different person, and then they're reading his last rites to him. So it's just a lot to take in. I worried about my mother. I worried about a lot of things that I think. It's unfair for kids to worry about, because you have to man up, and for a 10-year-old to man up on something like that, and sort of, my brother was 13, he had to man up too, and it was that's a really young age for someone to sort of have to grow up very, very quickly.
So it's interesting, that you discovered punk and it meant so much to you. So once you got deep into punk, did that also bring on any kind of like physical transformation, just in terms of how you wanted to look physically, and what kind of like attitude you wanted to present to the outside world?
I think so. I mean, there was definitely, it wasn't really a dress code. I think at the time when I was getting into punk, there wasn't really. I think the uniform was gone. In the scene. I mean, I wore stuff that my dad wore as a truck driver. I mean, I wore Dickies and Ben Davis shirts and derby jackets and flipped up baseball caps and Chuck Taylors, and with a pile of bleach on top of your head. It was you went around and you borrowed eyeliner from girls that were around the scene at the time, and it was. It was just, it wasn't really a dress code. I mean, that was just what we were into in the punk community,
So you mentioned that you would borrow eyeliner from the girls. Why couldn't you buy it? Why'd you have to borrow it?
I think it was just good conversation, It was, I think that's sort of almost where it came from. There were the girls that were around. I mean, I think all. Well, not all, but I think a lot of women like to see what guys look like dressed up like women. So, or just put makeup on them or whatever, So it was just kind of a fun little activity, and I think it just sort of stuck throughout the years.
So, some of your songs are also about psychological issues. Like one song mentions soda pop and Ritalin. There's the song Basket Case, the song Give Me Novocaine. And I'm wondering, like, how much of that is about you, if you were like medicated at all, or in therapy, or told you should be in therapy when you were in your teens in school.
Not so much. I think I try to mix humor with mental health. A song like Basket Case is sort of about panic attacks, and Give Me Novocaine is just. Where you self-medicate, whether it's with alcohol or weed or speed or, whatever your drug of choice is, or, it's just kind of falling into that experimenting with, escapism in unhealthy ways. But I think when I was a kid, there was a lot of, it was drinking and acid and mushrooms. And
Did you do a lot of acid?
did my share.
Tell me what your trips were like, and whether you saw them as kind of like spiritual, meditative, exploratory things, or whether it was more about music or more about like something else altogether, and whether they were good trips or bad trips.
It kind of depends on the moment of the trip. I think the first part of a trip is always is the funnest part.
When you
The
feel it
middle
coming on.
Yeah, and then there's about the 2 or 3 hours where you're completely confused, and there's certain hallucinations that are happening that I'm not particularly fond of. But then there's the come down, which I always enjoyed also. But the whole experience itself was never really. I don't think it ever really contributed to music. I think it cracks open your brain a little bit, but and in the long run, it's and seeing sort of all the casualties around Berkeley and San Francisco because of it. I was always kind of something that was like I never got completely into.
So you never played while you were on acid?
I did. The first time I ever dropped acid, I played with this band called Blatz, and I remember. They were a local band, really crazy. It was like they were basically like the B-52s on acid. There was two female singers, and there was one male singer. The male singer always, this guy Jesse Luscious, always ended up naked on stage. It was a very memorable experience, to see guitar strings that were started kind of wrapping around my neck a little bit. And just like
seems funny now, maybe not so much then.
Well, it wasn't that, but that was part of the downside, which I didn't. When I was coming down, I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun," but not really something I ever did with Green Day. Mike and Trey, they definitely did their share of playing. I think we played the Gorge in outside of Seattle, Washington, on Lollapalooza, and they dropped acid then, and that was, an interesting experience to see a rhythm section look at each other and giggle for, 45 minutes.
So the guy who used to take off his clothes while he was performing, could you ever imagine yourself doing that?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
I used to do it a lot. When right after Dookie came out, I was arrested for it in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I did it at Madison Square Garden because I didn't know if I was ever going to play Madison Square Garden again. So I said, well, there's one way to remember this occasion is to be the guy that was naked on stage in Madison Square Garden. And then, it came down to a point where it was everywhere we played, the cops started showing up and saying, if this guy gets naked on stage, he's going to be arrested immediately. And sure enough, it happened eventually in Milwaukee.
So what statement were you making by taking all your clothes off?
It was like this non-statement statement. There was no. I just was. It was. Old enough to know better, but too young to care. Kind of attitude towards it.
So let's hear another a song, and this is "Give Me Novocaine," and there's a line I particularly like in this: "Bittersweet migraine in my head. It's like a throbbing toothache of the mind." I like throbbing toothache of the mind. I think most of us have had a throbbing toothache of the mind.
Yeah.
So Give Me Novocaine reminds me of the Ramones title, I Want to Be Sedated. Were you thinking about that at all when you wrote it?
No, I mean, that's definitely a kind of poetry that I definitely relate to. A song like Now I Want to Sniff Some Glue or something like that. It's, I think that was a new way of writing lyrics and just like straight right to the point, exactly what's going on.
One of the amazing things about Green Day is that you met Mike Dirnt from the band, the bass player in middle school. So
yeah,
that's kind
10
of
years old.
It's kind of amazing. Like very few relationships withstand the test of time from middle school to adulthood.
I remember the first conversation we ever had was because we ended up in the same class. It was Miss O'Connor's class, and I met Mike pretty much the first week in school, and we, he just ended up coming over to the house all the time, and we just became really close. I think sometimes my father dying and Mike coming into my life at the same time sort of coincided, but I think it was around when music really started hitting us both together, playing at the same time, was around, I think, seventh grade, and we started learning like heavy metal songs and together, and just jamming together all the time. He'd come over with his guitar, and I'd go over to his house with my guitar, and it just sort of it lasted till now.
So Trey Cool, who's the drummer with the band, he grew up in an unusual way. He grew up in a home without electricity, no television. I don't know if he had radio or probably not a stereo or anything. So I think, stop me if I'm wrong here, that his father was a veteran who wanted to kind of like move away from the world when he got home, and that's why they moved to like a mountain or something. Is that close to? Yeah,
they moved up to the mountains up in Mendocino County, basically like a back to the land kind of family.
I see. Okay. Okay.
And I think Trey had a lot of freedom growing up there, and he didn't have a typical childhood at all. I think you can. If you talk to him and hang out with him for a while, you would understand. Well, he's not a typical guy at all. He's, but he ended up playing in a band called the Lookouts, and the first time I ever saw the Lookouts play, he was wearing an old woman's shower cap, and he had like a tutu on or something like that, and I remember thinking that he was an amazing drummer. So I mean, it was a difficult transition going from our old drummer to Trey, just because Trey was just a show off, and so it was kind of. But I knew that the way that he played and the different beats and that background, and because he had a background in jazz and he could play any sort of particular beat or that you wanted, that I knew I could, as a songwriter, I know that I can always write a song that he's going to be able to play immediately. So it kind of opened up my world at the same time.
And when you started touring, Trey's father, your drummer's father, was driving. So, yes, or is that incorrect?
Oh yeah. He started. We started touring in 1990. We did the van tours first. This was before Trey's dad came in, so we did 3-4 tours before that, and then when we got a little bit of money together, we bought a bookmobile. But someone needed to have a trucker license to be able to drive this thing. And so Trey's dad knew how to drive it. Or he had the license for it. So he became our driver when we were touring. We opened up for a band called Bad Religion. Then we ended up going on tour all through the United States again after that in a bookmobile. And that we just converted into this little touring bus.
So, did it feel funny to be playing punk music and having one of the band members' fathers having to drive you?
No. I mean, Frank was Trey's dad was. He was one of the guys. There was no rules or anything like that we had to, that most kids had to abide by. So, we just. It wasn't like he was, he turned into everybody's parent, or he wasn't even Trey's parent. He was just, he just kind of let us just roam, do whatever the hell we wanted, and he would go out. We go out and get tattoos, and he would get a tattoo with us, and he would, it was not really like a typical, he was just, he was someone that you could relate to, and. I remember when this band Tribe Called Quest would go up and play during Lollapalooza, and there would be these big low end subs that would go out, and it would just shake the entire backstage, and just this really boom, and I remember one time Frank going, "Oh, I don't like that noise." And we're like, why is it? Because that reminds me of dropping napalm in Vietnam, and that was like oh my gosh, So that was a whole different. He kind of added a whole different perspective. I mean, he wasn't just Trey's father, but he was just this. I don't know. He was just kind of this cool guy at the same time.
Well, let's hear another song. And for this one, we'll go back to Dookie, which won the Grammy for Best Alternative Music Album in 1994. Now, I want to play Basket Case, which has a line about being neurotic to the bone. Can you talk about writing the song?
I remember that song being hard to write. It wasn't an easy song to write, and the lyrics kept changing, and it started out as a relationship song, and then it got the idea for it to be more neurotic and a panic attack song, and it seemed to hit home. And I didn't even expect the song to actually be a single. It was just seemed like it was just a difficult song to play. But then and then it got released, and then I guess I was wrong about that.
Well, it had a video too.
Yeah. A video of, like, we were in an abandoned insane asylum, and that was pretty heavy to see. Just all of the different, there would be scratch marks on the walls, people trying to climb out, and it was very like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, kind of moment. Just like kind of there's the ghosts that were in that place were just it was kind of terrifying, really.
Okay, so this is Basket Case from the Green Day album Dookie.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? I am one of those melodramatic fools, neurotic to the bone, no doubt about it. Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me. It all keeps adding up. I think I'm cracking up. Am I just paranoid? Am I just up? I went to a shrink to analyze my dreams. She says it's like a sex that's bringing me down. I went to a whore. He said my life's a bore. Choke with my white cause it's bringing her down. Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me. It all keeps adding up. I think I'm cracking up. Am I just paranoid?
So that's Basket Case from the Green Day album Dookie, and my guest Billie Joe Armstrong is the lead singer, guitarist, and songwriter for the band. And of course, now on Broadway is the show American Idiot, that's based on the Green Day album of the same name. I'm wondering what it's been like for you to basically become a man on stage. In other words, when you started performing, you were a teenager. You were probably in your 20s when the band started taking off. Is that?
Yeah,
Is that
22.
about right? Yes, that's pretty young. And so then you became a father. You have 2 children. So you've grown up a lot since you started performing. But a lot of your songs are about the questions and the problems of being young, and of like finding your place in the world. But you've kind of found your place. You've grown up. You're the father of 2. Do you feel like you've been able to grow and change on stage? You know what I mean? Growing up, like becoming a man in a public way like that.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of one of those rare things. I think I've become better at being on stage through the years, especially right around when the record Nimrod hit. I think especially with big audiences, there's certain things that I had to learn to I think there's more of an emotional thing that happens at our show. It's not just about chaos and out of control, and I think it becomes about people dancing and people having a really great time and knowing that I'm responsible for that. So it just becomes sort of this gathering, and you see all the one thing about our shows that what I try to do is to have the dynamics of it. And I'm not just talking about when music gets loud and music gets soft. It's also, I think, like concerts for me do become about anger. I think they become about sadness, and then they bring you back to some sort of conclusion, and the crowd feels involved. It's not just about the singer, or it's not just about the band.
Is performing cathartic for you? Do you feel like you undergo some transformation during the course of a concert?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a place to die, then I guess on stage would be it's like a lot of people would die in their sleep. I think I would rather die on stage. I just put everything I possibly can into a show, and just make sure that I walk away with the same experience, where I'm not. It's not just about maybe the performance of it, but it's like you sort of guide the audience to, or where the audience is guided me to, at the same time.
Is it ever a problem that life itself isn't as vivid as life on stage can be?
Sometimes it's hard, when you're at home on Sundays and there's not much going on, it becomes a little tough. I think because those are such extreme highs that you go through. It's an addiction, being on stage. So finding those moments, it takes a lot to find those moments of silence, Sometimes it's trying to find moments of silence when you're actually on stage, where you look out and you go and you think to yourself, I have to make sure that I'm enjoying every second, and just notice that no one is sitting in their seats. Everyone is up, and I'm just trying to take it all in, And then when you're at home, it's just trying to take in where it gets really silent, and it's like, oh, this is kind of a mundane experience, And it takes an adjustment. It takes me a week or two to adjust from being, when I get home from tour. I mean, sometimes I think Adrienne, my wife, would, she's like, when you come home, why don't you stay at a hotel for a week or something like that, just for the transition,
Like coming up from the bottom of the ocean and getting the bends or something.
Yeah, totally.
So, you met your wife at a Green Day show. Was she a fan?
I don't know I don't think she was a fan. She was just the girl in Minneapolis that was part of the Minneapolis Mankato punk rock scene. And, she I met her. We played in a basement, and she happened to be there. And then we played at this place called the Varsity in Dinkytown a couple of days later. And she showed up there, and everyone was we got everyone to come up on stage and start dancing. And she was the only one sitting down in the audience. And she came up to me after, because we ran out of we had these EPs that we were selling, and she's asked me for an address where she can get one, and then I just gave her my address, and then we started writing letters back and forth to each other from Minnesota to California.
Oh, interesting. And then you actually started spending time in person together.
Yeah, we were talking on the phone, and we were writing letters, and I was just like, I gotta go back and see this girl. I haven't seen her since the summer before, and I think it was around spring of '91. And then I had to see her again. So we had this mini tour. It was like 5 shows. We had to drive all the way out to the Midwest. We played in Beloit, Wisconsin, Sioux Falls, and then we played in Minneapolis, and we played in Mankato. And then she showed up in Sioux Falls, and then she just grabbed me. And she said, Billie Joe. And I turned around. And I had to remember what she looked like, because I couldn't. It just didn't register at first. I remember her voice just from the phone. And then she turned and looked at her friend, and he goes, he doesn't remember me. And I felt like the biggest tool at that second. I was like, oh, my God, I can't. Yeah, I was like, yes, I do. And so we, I don't know, then we went there was a dumpster out in the back, and we just talked all night long. And so that was almost 20 years ago.
Dumpster sounds very romantic.
Yeah, well,
and so you were sending real letters to each other, not emails.
No, this was before. I didn't think I got an email address until about 2 years ago. So we were, we were just writing letters and running up large phone bills.
So I'm thinking about how much you've seen the music industry change. Like, you started as this, punk band and an indie band, and now you've got a Broadway show, and you've got like a new rock band video game coming out that will be called Green Day Rock Band. So I don't know. It seems like you've seen both extremes.
Yeah, it keeps evolving, and I like kind of being on both extremes too. I would never abandon one. I love playing clubs and doing these different projects, whether it's something like the Foxborough Hot Tubs or Pinhead Gunpowder or something like that. I still get the same charge out of it. And then, putting out EPs and things like that. But I also like the opposite extreme of doing things like rock operas and getting into musical theater and and seeing what different formats that you can put records out on, whether it's vinyl or a CD or digital download or a video game. So it's I don't know, and it just keeps changing. You just got to be open to those ideas.
Well, it's really been great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Billie Joe Armstrong is the frontman of Green Day. Their 2004 album, American Idiot, has been adapted into a Broadway show that's received a Tony nomination for Best Musical. You can listen to several tracks by Green Day, including Basket Case and American Idiot, on nprmusic.org. Here's Welcome to Paradise from Green Day's album Dookie.
Welcome to paradise.